and welcome to this video. My name is Jannis and I want to share with you how you can create this cool, energetic, driving IDM type beat that you heard in the intro, which is really fun to make and includes some super fun modulations that I want to focus on in this video, because they can be a great inspiration source for actually starting to make beats. And instead of just programming individual notes, which is fun, you get some other layer of excitement, bringing some almost generative touch to your beats, having some elements that sometimes come, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they also sound different. And this excites me a lot, so I'm really excited to share this. And we're also only going to use the analog engine, so it's also a great video for exploring a little further the analog side of Syntakt. And if this sounds cool, let's jump right into it. So I'm just starting with like some empty project. And first of all, let's change the tempo because we want a faster tempo. I think 142 is great, but you can pick whatever you feel like, of course. And I also want to start with the snare drum, which I have on track 10. Because as I mentioned, I'm only going to use the analog engines and they are all on those 4 tracks. And the snare has the most charismatic part also in terms of the modulations, I feel. So I want to start with it. And as I mentioned, using those types of modulations can be a great inspiration source for actually building other stuff on top. And the main idea is super simple because I just programmed like a 2 and 4. So maybe for orientation, let's also program a kick on 1 and 3. So we hear the beat in its entirety. So this would be the placement of the snare. Sounds really amazing. Okay, so let's focus on the snare. And there's a great technique that I like to use, which is adding some ghost notes that don't have like a 100% chance, because we can lock those snare hits so they have like a 100% chance, and also they have like a full velocity. So whatever we do now to the global settings of the trig menu doesn't affect those 2 snare hits, which is really important, because now we can fill up those other positions and basically lower probability and velocity. And we have some very musical dancing ghost notes playing around the main notes of the snare. Of course, you could also be really specific and assign individual probabilities to all those ghost notes, but I like to keep it this way because I can also modify this during some recording or even like some live performance. So if I increase this, we just get a higher density. And also changing the velocity is quite changing the whole vibe of the beat. But let's keep it like this for now and focus a bit on the sound. So I used the snare drum natural with those settings, if you want to copy them. I used the natural snare because I wanted to modulate the noise. So you can use whatever sound, of course. But here, the great thing is that you have a very specific setting for 2 types of noise. So actually you have 2 noise filters. And all I was doing then was going to the LFO menu, picking the random LFO and changing the setting to hold. The speed doesn't really matter if you use the hold setting on random mode. I increased a bit the depth, and then I let it play and basically browse through the destination settings. And as I mentioned, I really like to focus on the noise decay or noise low pass filter, high pass filter, but it's really fun to actually see how it affects the sound. Let's try it. Oh, this is also great. This one I really like, so sometimes we get some longer decay, or also shorter decay. And here, if we mess with the filters, we actually get some different types of noise, which is also super cool. And then you can actually change the intensity by playing with the amount. For the beat, I ended up using a modulation of the noise decay with the first LFO, and with the second LFO, I'm modulating the high pass filter. And now, one additional thing that is great to do is to lock the important steps, because if I keep it like this, it sounds cool, but also our accents, like the 2 and 4, get those modulations, so maybe the whole beat sounds a little too random. To me, it sounds great. But I don't really hear the 2 and 4 anymore. And what you can do is also that you can lock the LFO intensity for those snare hits. So if we hold them down, we basically bring the depth to 0 or almost 0 for our snares and do the same for LFO2. And now it only messes with those ghost notes or those random notes in between. And the 2 and 4 will always be punchy and clear. And I think this really helps bringing some system to the whole pattern. Now it also becomes super fun to increase the density of this pattern by increasing the probability. Or even the velocity. And a cool general setting, I think, is 20% probability and velocity. What was it? 30, I think? Yeah, somewhere around here. Maybe even 20. Let's also check out the kick. So it has a very deep sound. I like it a lot. It's the bass drum classic. And if you want to copy the settings, they look like this. The kick drums I like to keep simple. I mean, you could also add the LFO stuff, but if you do it to every track, it can sound a little too random. I think it's always great to find a balance between randomness and also composed parts that always happen again. And for the rhythm, I think it's great to create groups of 3 or focus on groups of 3, especially if you want to create those more, let's say, rhythmically complex IDM type beats. So here I was using a pattern where I actually started with 2 16th notes. A note on the 2, I mean here it says 5, but it would be 16th note grids, and if you have like a bar, it would be the 2 where also the snare plays. And then I basically create those groups of 3, which means I have a note, I leave 2 free, note, 2 empty slots, note, 2 empty slots, and again note, 2 empty slots. And together with the snare, which still gives us like the 2 and 4, we always know where we are inside the beat, but we also create some interesting complexity. Probably the snare could be a little louder. And now for kick drums, one thing I really like to do, not with an LFO, but with trig locks, is to make certain notes, or maybe just one note a little longer, because it can add so much depth to a kick drum pattern. Instead of just having the exact same sound all the time, you increase, for example, the decay for one particular step. And I don't know, it's a very simple trick, but I feel like the beat sounds so more deep this way. By the way, in case you enjoyed this video and also feel like supporting the channel, you can take a quick second to click the like button and also be warmly invited to subscribe, because I have some more videos about Syntakt. I will create more videos about Syntakt in the future. And also there are many more videos about all sorts of music production topics, also music performance, because I'm a drummer myself. So I think you can find something even if it's not about Syntakt. So warm invitation to check out my content. And also I have a website where I offer like some online classes, some sound packs, or you can also consider booking me for some one-on-one. So again, warm invitation to check it out if you're interested. Next, we have some sort of rimshot pattern. It doesn't sound at all like a rimshot, but I like the engine a lot because you get those really cool tribal, also IDM-ish type sounds. Sounds a lot like FM to me as well. So isolated, it sounds really boring though, because again, we need some modulations. And the basic settings look like this. So it's the RS engine, RS hard. I think there's also another one. And first, for the rhythm, I also liked to play with the groups of 3. And here I was even a bit freer and created some longer patterns. So I opened the pattern menu and pattern per track and made it longer. And so we also need to adjust the maximum length. And then I was basically freestyling this pattern. So starting on page 1. I started always with a group of 3 and then making those kind of same patterns as with the kick drum, that you create 1 note, leave 2 free, note 2 free, those groups of 3 basically. And then you do it for a couple of times and fill up your pattern. And again, this is a really randomized approach, but it sounds like somebody's improvising if you create this over a longer cycle, like this is 4 pages. And let's see, one more. Probably there's a mistake somewhere, but that's also cool. It's just about the basic idea. You could also fully randomize this by drawing all notes and using the probability control. But for me, it would be too random. And here I like this kind of rhythmic idea of groups of 3, but over a longer cycle. So it doesn't really sound like static loop. So the snare is like okay with just 1 page because there's the variation through the probability, and here it's more like a fixed pattern. But again, we can make it more interesting by using the LFOs, and it's again exactly the same technique. The random LFO is really, I think, my go-to tool on the Syntakt because it can add so much more interesting layers to any sound and prevent your beats from sounding too static. And again, a bit of depth, the hold mode. And again, we can actually play it and see what it does to different types of sounds. Tune is often really cool. Also, decay time can be great. And actually here, I like the sweep depth. You those cool, absurd, random melodies. And in the end, I decided to use the syn decay. So I'm modulating a bit the syn decay and also the one I've shown you, like the depth of the sweep, which is basically like a pitch envelope. But somehow here, the random melody sounds cooler compared to just modulating the tune. Just my opinion. But then you get this cool type of sound. And there's one more cool sound, which is some cowbell. So the engine I used was the cowbell metallic, and the settings look like this. Doesn't have so many settings. It's actually great sometimes to have those really simple sounds. And again, some modulations will have some major impact on the sound, but this one I even like as the isolated hit. And my idea was to create some sort of offbeat pattern. So while the snare is on 2 and 4, or if you think of the Syntakt sequencer 5 and 13, we need the cowbell on the ends, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 end, or the 3, the 7, the 11 and the 15. So the basic idea sounds like this. And now we again create some dancing around the main hits. So first, let's actually lock them. So the condition and the velocity. And then we draw some additional notes. Decrease the probability, maybe also the velocity. So we already get some variety. And now again, we can play around with the LFOs. And I mean, it's often the same, but it's so much fun because the patterns get so interesting if you modulate them with the random LFO. So, oh, this was the wrong one. We don't even need it. So random, hold. We can already lock the depth for the steps on the offbeats. Oh, this was actually not so good. So we have 0 and 0. And we do it for the other LFO. And then you basically play around again. Oh yeah. this inspired you a little to create your own little IDM beats with a hint of absurdity and that are also a little faster and more energetic, I'm absolutely a huge fan of creating those types of beats with Syntakt because the modulations are just perfect for that. And if you also enjoyed this video, just take a quick second to click the like button, please, before you head over to your Syntakt and go try making your own IDM type beats. And also be known that I have more content about Syntakt. So here's a playlist with lots of Syntakt tutorials, and also here's another one with more general advice on music production. And apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye.